They would then build a new line just to the north, which you can also see to the right of our train now, up on the embankment behind Range Zone 2 Station. That new line is operated on today by the Southern Railway's successor, the Norfolk Southern Corporation. Of course, after the Southern Railway would abandon it, the 3 miles of track were donated to us here at the museum, and we have been running on them ever since. If you look to the left of our train now, you will see a gravel road. That gravel road marks the site of the original 1859 right-of-way. The line was elevated to its current height and position in the early decades of the 20th century due to numerous occasions of flooding. As an example of that flooding, in just a few moments to the left of our train, you'll see a sign. Next to that sign will be a tree with a yellow line painted on it. That yellow line represents the high water mark of the Great Flood of 1861. At 9 feet above the track, it explains why the line had to be elevated. Before the construction of the Chickamauga Dam in the Great Depression, the city of Chattanooga was extremely prone to flooding. This flood of 1867 would just be one of the many floods that would occur from the rising of the Turntable River. We're now crossing our first bridge over South Chickamauga Creek. In the water below, you may spot some turtles, river otters, or geese. To the left of our train, you probably saw a set of stone piers. Those stone piers mark the site of the original bridge. Unfortunately, that bridge was washed away by a flood in 1861. At the time of that washout, an engineer did not think the bridge had washed away in time, and, well, let's try to find a nice way to put this. Let's just say the engineer in his train that day went for a swim. There is only one word I have to describe that accident, and that one word would be splash. If you look to the left of our train, you will see a siding. That is Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum's McCarty siding. Occasionally that siding is used for 2 trains to pass. Although at the moment it is currently being used as a storage line for some of our future restoration projects. We're now preparing to cross over our second bridge over the Western and Atlantic Railroad. That line you'll see below us was built in 1850 by the state of Georgia, and interestingly enough, it's still owned by the state of Georgia today, although it is currently leased out to CSX. That line is also home to a very famous story from the Civil War. Some of you may have heard of it, and that would be the Great Locomotive Chase. For those of you that haven't heard of it, the Great Locomotive Chase is the story of James Andrews and 23 others known as Andrews Raiders. Their plan was quite simple. They would travel to Big Shanty, Georgia, which is today Kennesaw, and steal a locomotive named the General, while it was on a fuel, water, and meal stop. Andrews Raiders would then race the General all the way north to Chattanooga, while burning bridges and destroying track and telegraph wires in an effort to sever the crucial Confederate supply artery. All was going according to plan for Andrews Raiders until they saw black smoke rising behind them. At first they believed it was a ruse they had attempted to burn. That is, up until they heard a whistle. Blowing that whistle was the General's conductor, William Fuller. He first pursued the General on foot, then by hand car as a test of locomotives, and finally in the famous locomotive he commandeered, named the Texas. Now when Conductor Fuller did take the Texas, it was facing south. So for the duration of the chase, he had to run the locomotive in reverse. The General would run out of fuel just north of Ringgold, Georgia, about 18 miles down the track from Chattanooga. All the men were caught, 8 of them, including Andrews himself, were unfortunately hanged in Atlanta as spies. The rest of the men either escaped prison or exchanged for Confederate prisoners. Andrews Raiders were the first ever to receive the Congressional Medal of Honor, all except for Mr. Andrews himself, as he was a civilian and not eligible. If you would like to learn more on the topic, there are many books and films based on the event, such as Buster Keaton's silent film, The General, and one of Walt Disney's lesser-known films from the 1950s, also titled The Great Locomotive Chase. I would now like to take this opportunity to point out a few of my favorite trees along the route. Like this one, and this one. I like that one on the left. But that one right there with the leaves on it is my favorite. I really don't like that pine tree.
I use pine trees.
We're now crossing our third bridge over Tunnel Boulevard. Originally, that road you see below us was tunneled underneath the railroad, hence the name. After the Southern Railway did abandon this line in the mid-1950s, the roof of the tunnel was excavated by the city of Chattanooga to avoid maintenance costs. After the land was donated to us here at the museum, we put a bridge over this gap. So today, we have Tunnel Boulevard without a tunnel. We're now making our climb up Missionary Ridge, but rather than travel over it, we're going to travel through it, through the Missionary Ridge Tunnel, also known as the Whiteside Tunnel. This tunnel is 986 feet long, almost the length of 3 football fields. It's completed in 1858, dedicated in 1859, and was excavated entirely by a pick and shovel, as dynamite was not invented until 1867. So, in theory, I guess you could say, this tunnel's construction went off without a bang. The tunnel is the reason that the line would eventually be abandoned. After World War II, the railway's equipment was becoming much too large to fit for the pre-Civil War era tunnel. Also, the tunnel was single track, while the rest of the line was double track, creating a major bottleneck. A new line would be constructed just to the north, which you all saw up on the embankment behind Grand Junction Station. That new line is now operated on by the Southern Railway's successor, the Norfolk Southern Corporation. If you have a flashlight app on your cell phone, I do encourage you to have those out at this time to illuminate the tunnel walls as we pass through them. At times there is less than a foot of clearance between us and these tunnel walls, so good thing we don't have any open windows. If your window is open, please see a member of our staff, as they are not designed to do so. You probably just heard the whistle of our locomotive signaling our approach to the tunnel, meaning that we will be entering the tunnel walls at any moment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment you've all been waiting for, the inside of rock.
It's tunnel time in Tennessee, everybody. That's right. That's right.
The walls of this tunnel are lined with indigenous limestone, although many people do take it for granted.
Hey, I can stand up.
That's cool.
We're now on the west side of Missionary Ridge. You can imagine traveling on an early 20th century Southern Railway passenger train, and this is how you would approach downtown Chattanooga, with your final destination being Terminal Station. Terminal Station has today been converted into the Chattanooga Choo-Choo Hotel. Now, of course, back then, you would have seen more than just passenger coaches on a Southern Railway passenger train. For example, you probably would have seen baggage cars, RPO cars, sleeping cars, lounge cars, stone cars, observation cars, or my personal favorite, a dining car. Speaking of dining cars, how does a steam locomotive eat? It choo-choo-chews. In just a few moments, we will be crossing our fourth and final bridge over Arno Street. The Arno Street Bridge is the shortest bridge along our route, so make sure not to blink. We know that Arno Street wasn't named by somebody around here, because if it would have been, they would have called it Ain't No Street. In about 5 minutes or so, we will be coming to a stop at our East Chattanooga depot. Once off the train in East Chattanooga, you got the option of staying on board the train for the layover, or joining me as we have a brief demonstration of our turntable, as well as a behind-the-scenes look of our back shop. For those of you that do wish to visit East Chattanooga with me, we do have our East Chattanooga depot available for business. Restrooms are available in East Chattanooga, and so are wonderful snacks and drinks. I highly recommend everybody going in and checking out East Chattanooga before you leave. If you do choose to join me off the train to the layover, we do have 4 safety rules we ask you to follow. Rule 1 is to please stay with the group at all times, as this is a guided tour, so please do not wander off. Rule 2 is to please do not climb on any of the equipment you may see around the property. I know it looks very fun, but it is very dangerous. Rule 3, please stay on the concrete pathway at all times. So do not walk on any traffic jam or ballast. And finally, Rule 4 is of course my favorite, and most strictly enforced, to have fun. The Southern Railway originally only donated us a mile and a half of track. That track began right here in East Chattanooga. So if you were to visit the museum in the first 2 decades of our operation, this is where you would have come to get on the trains. You have then proceeded a mile and a half over to Tunnel Boulevard and then reversed back. So as you can see, we have been on our train ride quite a bit for you folks.
It's the worst part.
Please do remain seated until we come to a complete stop. We'll let you know when it is safe to head to the exit. Once off the train in Chattanooga, just take a left turn and head on down to our turntable.
That's real.
Before we begin our demonstration, we want to make sure everybody's down around the turntable so we don't leave anybody out. So once again, it'll be just a couple of moments before we begin our demonstration. We're going to be using our turntable. Now this turntable was built in 1916 by the American Bridge and Iron Company based out of Ambridge, Pennsylvania. It was built for the Central Georgia Railway's Macon locomotive shops in Macon, Georgia. It was used there up until 1925. In 1925, the turntable was moved to a branch line based out of Cedartown, Georgia. And Cedartown is used in a very similar fashion as to how we're using it today. Now, unfortunately, all operations in Cedartown were eventually abandoned. We found this locomotive abandoned in Cedartown in the late 1970s. We moved it to this location and gave it a $100,000 overhaul. This table has been used here almost every day since July 4th, 1982. Now, this turntable is 80 feet long and weighs in at around 80 tons. Your locomotive today weighs in at about 200 tons, making the overall weight between the two about 280 tons. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why is he telling me all this? Well, let me surprise you know that this turntable was originally turned by hand. It was an Armstrong table. There would have been a set of poles extending from each corner of our turntable, and it would have then taken at least 4 people to completely turn this turntable around. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to need 4 volunteers. I got 1, I got 2, I got 3, I got 4. Our motor today is by ensuring that our turntable is balanced. In the center of this table is a 6-foot in diameter ball bearing. Our engineer Travis must balance all 200 tons of that locomotive over that ball bearing. Now, that is a very difficult process, but there is one easy indication of a balanced turntable, and that's by watching the end where I'm standing. Once that locomotive is balanced in the center of the table, you'll see this end of the turntable drop by about 3 inches. So as we like to say here at the Tennessee Valley Railroad Museum, once the table drops, Travis stops. Turning. Everybody give a wave to your engineer, Travis. He's the one that drove you here today. And your locomotive today is Southern Railway number 630. This locomotive was built in 1904 by the American Locomotive Company in Richmond, Virginia. It was originally built for the Southern Railway's Murphy branch based out of Murphy, North Carolina. And this locomotive is a 280 type steam locomotive, meaning that there are 2 small wheels under the pilot here in the front, 8 large driving wheels, and 0 wheels under the cab. Now, the way this locomotive operates is actually quite simple. Up in the cab, our fireman, Zach, is constantly feeding coal into our firebox. Just above that firebox is a steel plate called the crown sheet. On top of that steel plate sits water. Now, what happens when you put fire above water? What are you creating? Steam, that's right. That steam is then fed through the middle of the boiler through some tubes called flues. There, it is then fed down to the pistons which sit on the front of the locomotive. You get your tractive effort from these pistons. After the steam is used in the piston, it is fed up to the smokestack, which creates your chuffing sound. And there's your mechanics class for the day. Now, some of you have probably seen our equipment before in the past. We are very often involved in Hollywood films and music videos. We've been involved in films such as October Sky, Full Parade, Leatherheads, Water for Elephants, and most recently 42 with Chadwick Boseman and Harrison Ford. We must now line our locomotive up with track 2, while our train sits on track 1. That's so we can perform what is known as a runaround. What that means is that our locomotive is going to go past our train and then through a switch. We'll then reverse back through that switch and recouple to the end of our train. So what was the front is now the back, and vice versa. Everybody give your crew a round of applause, as that was a fantastic turntable demonstration. And now we'll conclude that turntable demonstration. For those of you that would like to, you can now follow me back to our back shop, where we'll have a brief tour. If you do not wish to visit the back shop, you can reboard the train at this time or visit the depot. So for those of you that would like to, right this way to the back shop.
How do you get to the
think we already have enough of those. I'm a bit more already. Random auto race. They're so old for rusty.
Our crew of Missionary Ridge Local, we want to thank you all for riding with us and hope you did enjoy your excursion today. If you did enjoy your excursion, we do have many other longer trips available, ranging from 1 to 9 hours, such as dinner on Diner, Chicken and Tunnel Scene Special. We also have our holiday theme rides, such as the Christmas North Pole Limited and the Halloween Erie Express. This year we will have a 60th anniversary special event